Okay. Hi there, traders, and welcome to Trade the Structure and the trading day's morning jumpstart, where we'll take a look at the overnight action in the US session, the European markets, our key markets, key indices, and just what levels to watch out for today, and what were the main drivers of the overnight action. So we're coming to the Asian market session. That's about to kick off soon, and we'll just review our key levels. So overnight, US was obviously down. It did spike up. You see on the Dow, the actual NASDAQ opened and just drifted lower before it got a bit of a run on to the low, to the downside, sorry. But the Dow actually flushed higher and then pretty much sank just as hard or even harder. Okay, so it was all about the US dollar last night and inflation. So someone from the FOMC, I can't remember, I think it was Brainard, in a speech, and it was around 12:03, you could see AM, which is Sydney time, you can see all the markets basically sink along together. So all the major markets, say the FTSE, the DAX, the Dow, the NASDAQ, and everything started moving around 12:03 exactly. So it was kind of across the board. US dollar buying, so not so much a safe haven buying because gold didn't react at all, and the bonds did tick lower, but that was more linked to his comments on inflation and saying that they need to be a lot more aggressive with, towards inflation and towards rate rises. So that's saw a big readjustment to the dollar, pressing it higher into bonds, yields pressing them higher and bonds lower, and obviously equity markets took a bit of a hit. If they've got to start to deal with higher interest rates, or start to deal with higher interest rates sooner than what they expected. Okay, so that's why it looked like the Nasdaq had a bit of a run on that speech, and that was heading south already from the open. But the Dow, like I said, spiked up a couple hundred points and then come straight back down again once that news hit. Okay, so we'll look at kicking off on the SPY. So you can see, this was when the RBA come out and said, again, they've got a little, in a matter of words, they said they're going to be more aggressive to rate rises probably sooner rather than later as well. So it's all coming to flow through from different Fed reserves, not so much in Europe at the moment, but in BOE, the Bank of England, also were talking about a plan of attack for interest rates. And that's actually supported the FTSE, but it's got more to do with the pound as well, heading south because the US dollar pressed higher. Okay, so if you can understand all that, we've got a bit of a plan of attack. So it's mainly about the US dollar. So we're keeping an eye on that today, just to see what it's sort of doing to the overall markets. All right, so like I said, RBA come out and the market sank. Okay, so that was at 2:30. Didn't move on interest rates, but they said probably sooner rather than later, and that sent the market straight down. Okay, and it basically held down to the close, and it ramped the Aussie straight up. All right, so that flowed on into the European session and the US session, where you can see it's just a steady procession down into that 74.33 area. Now, it did bounce into the close. Whether that's not really a reaction to the level, it's probably more of a reaction to a short covering. Okay, a short covering. They had, if you're in shorts from this level 75.23, and you're looking there up, probably locking in 100 points, you don't know what the ASX is going to do on the open. It could get supported. You don't know. So it's probably not a bad idea just to lock in some gains into that close, being up close to 100 points. So you saw that good little flush. It'll be interesting today. That's the anchor to the downtrend, 74.67. See if they can hold a lower high and press down lower, or whether we're going to get some follow through with this sort of negative sentiment, or whether we're going to start to see that level buoy. Okay, looking at the bigger picture on the ASX 200, you've got same sort of thing. Market really pressed lower, and that's not, don't know what that level is. It should be 6 at 4 o'clock. There you go, about there. Oh, about there. So you can see that the market's pressed lower and continued to press down. So we've got some key levels just below that at 74.45, which the market may want to test into. And now if it gets out of hand and some selling pressure, we could be looking down to 74.05 and even below. Okay, that's only around 70 points away or so. Okay, so the market's going to open lower, open weaker, probably at 50 points or so, and it potentially could just really start to test into new lows, especially on the open. Okay, it'd be interesting to see that opening drive. Now, if you're a bigger fund with that negative sentiment from overnight, you're probably going to step aside. You're not really going to want to start to support it too much. If you're wanting to buy, you're probably going to just step aside, let it find a bit of a base and start to buy it up from there. Okay, but for now, it'll be interesting to see where we do flush up on the open and then start to find a lower high pressing down. Now, into Asia, Hang Seng was actually closed. And it's just opening up, so as you can see, it's just it's pre-open anyway. The market will open at 11:15 and then 11:30 for the underlying. Now it's got some catch up, so it would be interesting to see whether start to press into this level 22.30, 375, or we start to get a bit of a rush into that level, or where we start to get that level fade, get shorts coming to dive in. Something like this. If we start to get that sort of press down and then start to hold like that and press down to new lows, it'd be interesting. Now, the bigger term play, the bigger term picture is what I see is That's the initial leg up. We've had that contraction, so expansion, contraction of a move up. Okay, and your secondary leg up, we've just sort of finished that. Okay, I'd assume we finished that. So we're a bit stretched into that second leg up, and generally I'd like to look at the markets in two moves. Okay, two moves up, two moves down, especially when you got that, the bigger move was down. This is kind of a contraction, a major contraction phase in two legs, and we've just come to sort of the end of that potentially. So that's why I'm looking for that market's potentially extended to the upside, and we might want to see some buyers that have been buying it all the way up here start to lock away some gains. Okay, so I'll be biased down. We just want to see that confirmed. Now the Nikkei was let's expand that out. On the 5-minute chart here, you can see that's a leg down, another leg down into that support down here at 27,390. Okay, we could get a bit of a run onto the downside and just extend on that. But you can see these two legs also, they're sort of, even though it flushed into the low, it's sort of finished around this extension level. Okay, you can call it. So whether or not we start to flush down and start to get buoyed up here and start to squeeze out some of these shorts because the market may have preempted a bit of a sell-off in the US, or whether we get that continuation. So I'll be looking for two things here, maybe a flush for that potentially, this level to hold, or even this little minor level here, 27,444, to hold and hold a higher low off that level, or we're just going to come into there, consolidate, and just smash down. Okay, on the Dow, you've got we're looking at the 15-minute chart here. You can see that pump up. Okay, that really flushed up in the open and dragged in a lot of buyers on that break higher. I even bought that overnight. It was just trading intra-session, intraday, some scalping. Bought that for a couple of points win, and actually sold it somewhere up here for a couple of points win before it continued higher. But I pretty much went to bed once that started to sell off there. So there were some good opportunities on the downside. You can see these lower highs pressing in. Once it sort of flushed up, dragged in some buyers, trapped them in, and then come back straight back down again to hold that 34,892, and then start to fade off that level and push straight down to 34,565. Now I'll be looking for two things here. Maybe you're looking for a bit of a squeeze on this level. Maybe you could, because you're so close to that level, it could be easily looking for a bit of a stop hunt on a move down and start to hold a higher level, or we may just start to hold a higher level here and rush straight back up on a bit of a short squeeze from that overnight action. Okay, and the third option is we really start to get a move onto the downside. Okay, so if that's the case, we might be looking that this is a big move down, and you've got here we go, and we've got that move that could easily, like I said, that move there, it's phased into that level, consolidates around there, around 565, and then extends on that move down into 34,357. So it could really, we could easily extend on that move down. That's your first leg, that's your secondary leg. We call it a volatility expansion from that high down to this level here, and it sort of all matches up. So I'll be biased, maybe a bit of a squeeze high, just to squeeze out some of these sellers into the US Open and another fade lower. Okay, look at the US Tech now. US Tech was a lot better. Okay, I'm sorry, a lot worse on the open. It didn't get that opening drive, and it was 11:30. So this was the open, and unlike the Dow smashed straight up about a couple of hundred points. This was grinding down until the Dow turned and went down, and that news hit at 12:03, like I said, and it was basically it was 12:05 there. You can see this candle here started to head south and really got under pressure. Obviously, the Nasdaq and tech stocks are more susceptible to higher interest rates, and that's what their biggest concern is, considering how high they are. So it's just what the Fed's saying. They're really concerned. How concerned are they about this inflation getting out of hand, and what are they going to do about it? 1 or 2 basis points rate rises, or say 25 basis point rate rise, or 50, or how they're going to factor that in, okay? And what the market's going to factor in more importantly. All right, so that good little sell-off here. We're coming to that support zone at 14,738. The trend is still down. Maybe looking to fade that on a bit of a selling opportunity with a press down to that 14,738. Maybe it goes lower to 14,640. Okay, we're just keeping an eye on that one there, and you can see that potentially I'll be looking for, if that's the move down, and we've got, just clone that, and we've got roughly from that high there. You can see that volatility projection. Could see a nice little move into that level there at 14,640 tonight, and then may start to find some buyers down there. Okay, over to the DAX. You can see my Chrome is having a few problems loading this data. We've got that level held, which we were talking about, that 14,565. They had a little pop on the open. That was a 5 o'clock little pop, exactly the same as the Dow. Okay, flushed that level there. It was just searching for stops. searching for some liquidity before it faded off that level. Okay, so it was a hard trade to get into on the short side. I would have expected, even though you got some lower highs, but seeing that move up there would have really, been a bit concerning. But the thing is, personally, I probably would have looked at that move there, a pullback and a retest up into there, a bit more, a clear cut sort of a drive, pullback, and then something like that. I would have been looking for on your 5-minute timeframes, but it didn't really play out like that. It was kind of a drive up, took out the stops, and then a grind down until it started to get a bit of ahead of itself later in the session. And then we got, obviously, when the US opened, it continued to head south. All right, so what we're seeing now is that move off that level, 15,565, pressing into this low at 14,36318, and just see if that level can hold. Okay, if not, we're going to probably drive lower. All right, so that we may have some catch up to do on the DAX tonight as it closed a bit earlier than US, and the US continued to head south through the session into the close. Okay, looking at the UK. Now, we spoke about this before. They're talking up interest rate rises, and I think because of what happened with the US dollar pumping higher, it took some pressure off the pound, which is good. A weaker currency is good for exports, so that probably supported, I think, the FTSE, and the talk of because it is the kind of economy's going well. We've got inflation, and they're talking up potentially fending off that inflation, being more aggressive. All right, which is good in the longer term. So, and they're putting together, it's more than what the Fed said. The Fed said they were going to be aggressive. They're putting together a plan, okay, with the BOE, we're going to do this, this, and this, which is probably a lot clearer than what the Fed's saying, because the Fed has talked up inflation before. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, but they've just done nothing just yet. Okay, so whether or not that's pretty much what the market's focusing in on, and obviously that weaker pound, obviously with the US dollar going higher and potentially going a lot higher from here, as there's more shorts getting squeezed out, more longs getting repositioning higher for a stronger US dollar. That's going to help the pound head lower and potentially help the UK 100. So you've got this level. You can see it was nicely supported at 75.45. It had this little blast up through 75.84, took out these highs, retested into the level, and that was somewhere into the close of the US market before bouncing 75.70. The way it sort of flushed into that level quite hard, taking out a lot of these stops, and then bounced straight back again, leads me to believe we're going to start to find some support off this level here of 74.84 and maybe head higher again. Okay, so I'll be looking for that, but I want to see some higher lows build. So basically, if we can flush into that level and hold the higher low of 75.70, there could be a little extension to the upside on the cards. Aussie. So that was that ramp up once around 2:30, once the RBA came out with an announcement, and they altered their statement, saying they took off something. They took off the word patient, I think. So it's a matter of one word, being patient with interest rate rises, taking that off, saying we're not patient anymore. We're going to have to start, seeing some action on to the upside. So that's where you see this Aussie really start to power higher. Obviously, it's going to get that yield play, okay, on the currency basis. So you got the Aussie and the US dollar are talking about rate rises. The pound, the euro's lagging because they're not talking up. The ECB are not, talking anything about interest rate rises. So those currencies that are going to be more aggressive are going to start raising their rates. Are going to find some buying. It's just how they match off together. So you got the Aussie, with the US dollar, that was that ramp higher as soon as the US dollar started talking him up, and you can see that around 12, same time as everything started to sink. They US dollar rallied, that was banked. The Aussie dollar gave up a lot of those gains. So now it's whether or not it's going to hold that 75.65 area. So, with the Aussie US, it is powering higher. You've got interest rate rises here on the Aussie, interest rate rises on the US dollar. It's how they match off together, which is going to raise faster, which is going to be the yield play. Like, what sort of yield benefit are you going to get from the Aussie more or from being into the US dollar? Okay. So looking at that, like I said, I'll just be looking for that to hold there and see if we can work our way up off that level. Maybe looking for something like this with a higher low and see if we can work our way back up, because I think a positive stock market is probably not so bad. But with that US dollar powering higher, it sort of takes the shine off a lot of the commodity prices, which could take the shine off the Aussie. All right, into the euro. Once we get there, Euro, we were looking at this level yesterday. Okay, it's going to hold up, but they were thwarted by that comments from Brainard and the Federal Reserve, and that pretty much sent that US dollar higher and sent the euro lower. Okay, so just basically it was about here. Yeah, so it was about the same time, smashed lower, okay, as the US dollar spiked up. So that's broken the market out of that uptrend, with that sort of channel there that we were speaking about in the last few sessions, broke through that support at 109.62, and now we're headed down to 109.04, finding something, we're not really seeing a reaction just at the moment, so I'll be keeping an eye on that one. I wouldn't be buying it straight off that level. If I'm going to buy off that level, I want to see a deeper, sort of move through and then a bounce straight back up again, and then work off a higher low once it gets retested. I don't want to be buying it straight here because you could easily, flow straight through and you get stopped out. Okay, as long as you've got your risk, you know exactly where your risk is. So you're looking sort of for two things. You want to see something like this, a bit of a bounce up, working off that higher low, or you're going to, for the downside, you're going to look at, I can't really draw that up there, can I? Just delete that. You're looking for something like this, retest, and then fail off that level. So that push down, retest off that 109.04 from underneath, and then looking to sell into that move down and look for a move down to 108.34. Okay, the pound, like we're speaking about, the pound found some selling as the US dollar pressed higher. Really got smashed down. So quite interesting considering they were talking up interest rate rises, because you probably think that the pound finds some love as well, but it looks like the US dollar move well outweighed that, and that's pressed that pound lower, which has obviously helped their share market or the index, the UK 100. We got up to here 31.60 before we sold off, and that was around the same time as all the markets collapsed and that US dollar rallied. So whether or not the pound is factoring in, they've already factored in a lot of these rate rises or what they're doing here is anyone's guess here, but maybe we're finding some support into these lows here around that 130.88. Be interesting to see. So if it starts to grind its way higher and start to hold that level, we look for a bigger move down. Okay, so the bigger move down could take us down to this zone right around that 30, say 130 even, that 13,000 even mark. All right, so we'll just keep an eye on that one there. US yen. Now this is going to be interesting because I think we spoke about this before, and like I've said, we've been listening to an analyst. Really, I think he's really good, talking about the yen. Now they've got some figures up there that the Bank of Japan, BOJ, are looking at. They don't want too much, selling into that yen. So they're going to probably talk about some sort of what do you call it? They're going to I forget the word. They're going to start to jump in and start to protect it, defend that selling, and start to really put the pressure on those shorts, okay, and potentially steer them clear of shorting, and which would mean that they can fend off that appreciation in the US yen. Now they can't do too much if the US dollar is heading higher. Okay, they could probably start to try to sell into the US dollar, but I would be surprised if they don't start coming out and start spruiking intervention, okay, into the currency. So which would potentially, pressure it lower again. But at the moment, that move up was US dollar based. It's pressed higher off that 122.405, busted through 123.23.1, and we're just looking at this level here, 123.80, sort of that zone through here, which is that November 2015 high, which had break through before. So whether we're going to retest that, flush it, and come back down again, who knows? But I'm thinking there's going to be some talk of intervention soon. Looking at gold now. So gold didn't find any safe haven at all. So that's what we're talking about, the US dollar. It's more with regards to inflation and a US dollar move as opposed to any sort of fear-based buying, selling into equities. So it's interesting because I think the equities obviously sold off, but there's a lot of people talking about, okay, we're talking about inflation, we're talking about rate rises, but it's still coming from a very, very low base. Okay, so this rate rising cycle could take us from being near zero rates to just normalizing rates, as opposed to having interest rates really high, which can put pressure on the markets a lot. Okay, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out in the coming months or so. But for now, I'll be looking at gold. I sort of expect this here, a bit of a flush in 1925, and then potentially that to hold again for a move down through 1917, especially if the US dollar keeps ticking higher. Okay, and it's all based around inflation as opposed to safe haven. If there's going to be a safe haven bid into gold, you're looking for this level to hold at 1917, okay, and potentially a break up through, maybe retest, consolidate around there somewhere around 1925, and then start to head higher. Okay, so that's sort of the scenarios we're looking at. Now onto oil, and another reason why it's not a safe haven, you can see oil start to press lower, so that's reacting to that higher US dollar, and you can see moving down off 104.67, start to press them down into 101.75. See if that lower high can lead to that a press down through 98.25 and even lower. All right, so that move is down off this key lower high. We still haven't come into this zone here at 93.15, but I'm expecting that could be on the card soon. as long as this move down continues and you start to press into that 98.25. So if it starts to move into there, you expect at the very least to take out some stops. Now, if it stops us enough to continue that momentum down, is a different story, or whether we're going to get not FOMC, OPEC start to go, hey, we don't like lower prices, we want higher prices, we're going to turn the tap off a bit. Right, so we'll just see how that goes, how that plays out. Copper, US dollar move, you can see that US dollar around here, well, it was actually earlier than that. US dollar started to drift higher, it really spiked higher in around 1203, like I said. I think it was going sideways prior to that. Let's just look at that US dollar move. Here we go. So that dollar move was all at midnight. It was pretty much going sideways prior to that. Okay, so sideways it's drifting. The copper was drifting lower and really didn't get a run on when you got that US dollar move, but it's still under a bit of pressure. So I'm looking to see whether this level is now key, 109, well, say 105 even, whether that level is going to find a retest and hold and going to send it down lower to 109, so 101.93. Or whether we're going to start to continue this move up. This is a good pullback back to the MAs, start to find some buying pressure, pressuring the market back up. Okay, whether we start to see this kind of action, lifting it. All right, so that's, you're sort of looking around this zone here, see if that level can hold, which is, I'm just going to check out what that is. It's around 104.17, so just keep an eye on that one there. Bitcoin, last but not least, onto the cryptos. Now, they flushed a bit earlier than that sell-off, so whether they're expecting the US market to sell off, flushed through 46.875 in Bitcoin, then failed. And Ethereum was pretty much the same. We've come into this support zone and just holding off that at the moment. So whether we're going to see a bit of a pop or we're going to get this as a lower high, pressing down through 45,400, or whether it's just going to hold and ramp back up. Okay, so they might be thinking that that selling was overdue, overdone in the US market, and we start to find a bit of buying pressure, pressing it back up to 46.875. For now, it's holding lower highs. It's still holding higher lows. It's just a bit uncertain at the moment. And you're looking at Ethereum, much the same action into this level of 34.18. So holding lower highs. This level is holding at the moment. It's not conducive to too much of a sell-off. You've got this level, the way it's spiking up as well as down. You're holding lower highs, but the bounces are quite not savage, I would expect, but they're bouncing quite hard. If it was a weakness into the market, you would expect those bounces to be a lot shallower. Okay, so that's why I'm looking at that level of 34.18 to potentially hold. I think they really want to see what happens in the Asian session and come into the start of Europe where there's more selling into equities. If there is, I'd expect these to head lower. All right, that's all I want to say. I've got a bit out of hand on the time, but I hope you enjoyed that. We'll be back again tomorrow, speaking again tomorrow, see how we go today in the Asian session, whether there's decent sell-off or whether there's going to be some bargain hunters start to step in to provide some sort of support into the share markets. All right, guys, thanks for joining me. If you like what you hear, it'd be great if you can jump on the YouTube channel, subscribe if you haven't already, and leave us a like. All right, guys, we'll speak to you again tomorrow. Happy trading.